point here is to what I want to do is shade around here so that the shoulder gets to be a little bit more three-dimensional. And I've just sharpened my 3B pencil, and that actually means that I over sharpened it a little bit and the tip is not completely straight. So I want to use some sort of paper. I'm going to use this for the time being right now, and take a little bit off the tip to where it's really a good smooth line. Okay, so this looks a lot better to me. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it doesn't curl into one side or the other anymore. So I'm using a pretty soft pencil and hold it quite flat to where I can really control where it goes. And I'm trying to get a pretty good gradient from the line inward. So if I hold the pencil if I hold the pencil too flat, my line gets to be too wide and too much of the stroke will be at the end. So I can't actually control it anymore. If I hold it too steep, then I get a very definite line, which I want to avoid in this case. So it needs to be somewhere in the middle. And I'm also trying to kind of put as little graphite on the paper at a time as possible so that I get smoother lines. And I know that I'm going to blend this with a Totillion in this case, so it doesn't have to be completely smooth, but I also want to make sure that I don't get any lines beforehand or at this time that I would then have to try and remove later on. So now I'm holding the pencil a little bit more steeply because I definitely want this to be quite a lot darker, but just at the very end, to make the stark line that I had done as the outline disappear a little bit. Alright, so now I have a relatively even gray gradient. But what I don't like about it is that there are still lots of areas, like in here, that are really a lot more white. So to blend that in a little bit, I'm going to take an etch pencil. Here it is. And now check the tip. So that seems to be just a little bit not sharpened enough, so I'll sharpen that real quick. Okay, that looks better to me. And then I can just go into these areas and fill them in a little bit. If I used a softer pencil here, I would be afraid of making them just too dark too quickly. Alright, so I like this better because the point of the exercise is to try and use a blending tool. I'm going to use my Totillion, and because I don't know, it's already used a little bit, it's darker on some spots than another, so I definitely want to go into onto a piece of paper that I have nearby and just check if it's so dirty that it actually starts drawing by itself, and get a little bit of a feel for what the Totillion does by itself. So it's definitely a little bit smudgy, which means that I want to be careful about the way that I put it down on the paper and then start rubbing. But it's not too bad. So I start by blending on the very outside, where I can still go in this direction. But somehow I have the feeling that that's not going to work as I go further that way, because I'm going to get that line here. So I want to use a part of the Totillion that is cleaner and slowly stroke this way, away from the dark into the light. Alright, so it's still a little uneven in places, like right here it's lighter than it's supposed to be. So take a darker spot of the Totillion and rub a little bit more of the graphite into there. This is not quite as smooth as I would like it to be, so I go over that area. And of course, because I'm doing this relatively quickly, I'm getting some pieces over the extent of the line, which I don't like. So I'm going to take one of my erasers that is not extremely clean, but also not quite dirty yet. So this would be a pretty new piece of eraser, which is still very light. This is the medium piece that I want to use. This would be quite a dark one. So I want to use one in the middle that keeps its shape relatively well, because there's already pigment in it. But I wanted to still have fairly good grasp on the graphite. So I've shaped a flat surface right here so that I have a good edge to erase with. And because I can't smudge over here, I can actually rub the eraser a little bit. Alright, so I have that cleaned up pretty good. And then I have some areas in here where it's a little bit darker in an area that should already be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take one of my erasers that is already quite dirty, so it doesn't have as much erasing power anymore, form a tip that is quite small, and just carefully remove some of the pigment there. And if I'm afraid that there is still too much pigment coming off at a time, I can go over to one of my dirty areas over here and just take some graphite off, so that there is more graphite on the eraser and therefore it doesn't erase quite as strongly anymore. Alright, so at this point I can say that I'm fairly happy with the gradient. Especially for now, because I don't really have a lot of context to put it in.